So the semester is basically over, and there is only essentially one thing left, is that is to send you your certificates, recommendation letters, performance reviews. It will probably be another week before you get all of those documents. And the reason for that is that we are still evaluating your reports. So we had over 1,000 teams this time, and obviously it takes time to read all those papers. We're talking about literally tens of thousands of pages of text. So we are trying to evaluate each report independently several times. So the way it works is that each report is being evaluated by 5, 6 different professors and sometimes company representatives. And so just like in your teams, you probably had some students who were less diligent, less responsible. The same thing happens when it comes to professors. So some professors were done with the evaluations a long time ago, and some are taking a little bit more time to complete their work, even though the deadline was over a week ago. Some are still working. So this is human nature, happens all the time, not only in student teams, but in corporate teams and in professor teams. But we are almost done. So if everything goes fine, another 2-3 days, and we should have all of the evaluations ready. And at that time, we will send you your performance evaluations, where we will talk about your performance in general, but also in relationship to other students who participated in XCulture this semester. Then your certificates, your recommendation letters, and likely we will include also the results of your tests that you took, like the cultural intelligence and whatever other tests you took this semester. So this way, by the end of probably sometime by Christmas, maybe sometime by the end of the next week, you should be getting those documents. And that's pretty much going to be end for the semester, but there will be 2 more things that we want to do. And again, once we have all of the evaluations. One, we will be sending out the invitations to the XCulture Symposium in Singapore. Pretty much everything's ready, and we are ready to do that. The only thing that we're waiting for is the final performance evaluations so that we know which of the students did better and deserve to be invited to this event. And then also the invitations to the XCulture coaching program. Again, we accept only, up until this semester, we aimed at about 50 people. This time, we're probably going to reduce that number to 40. So one of the reasons is that a larger team is harder to manage. So we'll probably, out of all whoever applies to the position, we will select 40 people and they will serve as coaches next semester. But to apply, again, you have to be invited, and to be invited, we need to know your performance. So for that reason, we're still waiting for the final results. But yeah, other than that, it's pretty much done, and we are ready to wrap up the semester. And so what I wanted to do today is to hear a little bit from you. So if you are, if you have a microphone, a camera, and you are brave enough to share with us your experience, just raise your hand. You have a button at the bottom of your screen that looks like raised hand. Just raise your hand, and I will add you here to the panel, and I would like to hear from you. First and foremost, just curious how things went in your team. What was easy, what was hard, what worked, what didn't? Did you experience any challenges? And if so, how did you deal with them? Maybe even some suggestions for the process, XCulture process. Maybe you have some ideas for how to improve it. I do have your reflection papers, and I have read not all of them, but most of them. Well, not most of them, about half of them. So we have a few other professors who are helping me with that. I mean, obviously, it's again hundreds of reflection papers, and it's hard. It's a lot of text, but lots of interesting ideas, lots of interesting observations, and actually some ideas are good enough. So we will implement them in the future. But here I wanted to hear from you directly, and kind of, just wanted to get to know you a little bit better, and also hear a little bit more about your experiences. So I see we have a lot of people here. So Dalen from Puerto Rico, Dana from Jamaica, Abebe from Germany, Deborah from no country, but there is a question. So if you have questions, now is a good time, and Deborah, I'll get to your question then in a minute. But more interestingly, I would like to hear from you. So don't be shy, raise your hand if you have a microphone, and I would like to talk to you. Now to Deborah's questions, will our effort put into our teams be taken into consideration? If so, how? So how would you evaluate your effort? I mean, obviously peer evaluations, right? Peer evaluations tell us how hard or how little a person worked. Then presumably the effort that you put in your work also translates into a better quality of the report in the end. And then another indicator of effort we have is your weekly progress surveys. Generally, people who do well also find time to inform us every week about their progress, basically complete the survey. And generally, if we don't see the survey, and some students, a small number, but some of them skip them, usually it's a bad sign, and usually it means that the student doesn't care anymore or is not, I don't know, diligent, responsible, conscientious, and basically, usually that means that within a week or two, the person will drop out from the project. And so obviously all of those things we will comment on in the performance review and the recommendation letter. So we will discuss what you have done in general in the recommendation letter, you know, description of the project, types of tasks you completed, types of skills you acquired. But then obviously we will look at all of those performance indicators and we'll comment on whether or not you have been staying on track and, you know, providing, submitting the deliverables every week and so on, whether or not you will, you have received high peer evaluations. And so in peer evaluations, as you remember, we have a separate category for effort, intellectual contribution, ideas, creativity, leadership. Obviously, we will comment on all of those things. And then all the way point by point, all the way until we get to the quality of your reports, where we will also talk about how good or bad in some cases that those reports are. So yeah, in a sense, we will definitely comment on that. And yes, Deborah says that she is from Ivory Coast. Yeah, very good. Yeah, very good. All right, so any questions, but more importantly, anyone is brave enough to join me here and tell us, you know, introduce yourself and tell us about who you are and more importantly, how things went in your team. Don't be shy. Don't be shy, guys. It's not for a grade. We just want to hear how things went from different people. Did you have similar experiences or were they different? So don't be shy. Come on. And Deborah, very good. So, okay. So we have Dana, Deborah, very good. Do you pronounce your name Dana or Dana? Let's see. Let's activate the microphone. Hello, hello. Can you hear me? Can you talk?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. So do you pronounce your name Dana or Dana?
It's Dana.
Dana. All right. Very nice.
Yes.
Okay, Dana. So tell us about your experience. So you are from?
Jamaica.
Jamaica. Very good. So not too far. So it's probably still warm where you are, right? Because it's gotten.
Yes, it is. It's Christmas time and it's still very hot actually in Jamaica.
Yeah. So you probably have Santa Claus under the palm trees, right?
Yes.
Kind of doesn't fit well. I mean, even though North Carolina is not that far north, but you know, all my life I lived in Canada, in Ukraine, in Germany. So those are colder countries. So tell us how things went for your team. Was it easy? Was it hard? If something was challenging, what was it? How did you deal with it? Tell us more.
First of all, I'd like to say it was indeed a pleasure to be a part of X-Culture.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was definitely an interesting experience and none like I've ever had before. I really appreciated that I could be a part of a team, and instead of just focusing on theory, I could be a part of something that I could work with people from different countries and cultures and really gain business experience. I enjoyed working with different people. And
what countries did you have represented on your team?
Yes, so we had Jamaica, of course, the Philippines, we had India, South Africa, and I think that was it.
Yeah, that's
and Trinidad.
Trinidad, yeah.
And surprisingly, it was only girls on my team.
Oh, it just happened to be only girls.
Yeah, only girls.
I will be honest with you. We don't plan on that. So when we form teams, we try to maximize the number of countries, and we are trying, paying attention to age, trying to make people, form teams where people are roughly the same age. But we don't really pay attention to anything else. And usually it happens to be about half and half, boys, girls, men, women. But all women, that's an unusual, statistically speaking, was improbable, but hopefully that wasn't a problem. Okay.
And there was someone from Taiwan as well.
Taiwan, okay, got it. So you had quite a few countries.
So all of my team members were very polite very nice girls. I didn't have any problems with any rude comments or insults or anything like that. And they, especially at the start of the team program, everybody was very willing and they were quite easy to communicate with. Being able to, although for many girls English wasn't their first language, they could manage quite well. And I think it's because of the willingness of the girls too. I didn't really have a problem with the time difference. I actually thought that would
Right, you had
be,
all the way, so you had, you had Philippines, Taiwan, so that's like 12 hours ahead of you.
yes, 12 hours. And
And then you
India,
have South Africa, that's about 6-7 hours, and then that's quite a lot of different, time zone differences.
mhm.
Tell me, please, how did you govern your team? So did you have a team leader? Did you elect a team leader, or you were all the same? How did it work for you guys?
So I was actually the team leader. They
Ah,
elected me to be the leader.
okay.
And with the time difference for me was an advantage because when I am at school or sleeping, someone else could actually pick up and work for me. So
Yeah,
that allowed for continuity of work and it allowed the team to progress in a sense.
yeah.
Um,
They call it global relay. So when you
mhm,
happen to have team members, let's say Asia, Europe, Africa, and then the Americas or the Caribbean, you literally are about 8 hours apart from each other. And so what many companies do, they deliberately have offices in those different locations
oh,
so that the Asian team can work while you guys are sleeping, and the
mhm,
Europeans or Africans take over, work for a few more hours, and by the time they are done, you wake up and
mhm,
take over. And so this way the work never stops, even though so the earth is spinning and everybody's working at some time. Yeah,
mhm.
yeah, very nice.
That was also useful. And what was also helpful to our team were the productivity tools.
Mhm.
We did
Oh yeah,
not,
yeah. How did you communicate? What did you use
yes.
except for the?
So after the first email, when we received, when we were placing teams, we connected through WhatsApp.
Mm-hmm.
Some people had to really create an account because one of my friends, one of my teammates in the Philippines, she usually used Facebook, so she had to adjust to WhatsApp. But it wasn't really a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So surprisingly, we'd communicate quite often, maybe every 2 or 3 days, sometimes every day. So
Mm-hmm.
that was interesting. And I realized that communication, especially when you're in a GBT, is really important.
Yeah, yeah, that's very, very true. You can repeat that again.
Yeah,
That's,
communication is
yeah, yeah, that's
key.
yeah. As they say, there are only three things important in GBTs: communication,
Communication. Yes, and I completely understood that, especially as I mentioned, the time difference can be an advantage and sometimes it's a problem. So once you communicate with your team members and tell them what time you'd expect a certain task to be done, what we did to assign tasks and even to come up with ideas, we created an idea bubble and a task sheet in Google Docs. So if we had any ideas throughout the week, we just write it down there.
And what
And
is an idea bubble?
it's the same thing as just a document. We just call it idea bubble.
That's an
So any
interesting.
ideas we had, we just placed it there.
Interesting. That's an interesting
Yeah.
expression. Please stay here, Dana. So I want to kind of get a conversation here. Deborah, is it Deborah or Deborah?
Both are fine.
Both are fine. Okay. All right. So tell us a little bit about yourself and tell how things went in your team with respect to leadership, communication, what countries you had represented. I'm just trying to compare here the experiences.
So in my team, we were 6 people. We had Jamaica, we had Morocco, Pakistan, Ukraine, and Bangladesh. And
Okay.
I'm from India, but I live in Ivory Coast.
Okay.
So
Mm-hmm.
countries.
So you also had quite a few continents here. Okay. Pretty much.
We did.
Yeah.
We did. So we had 2 guys and 4 girls.
Mhm.
So kind of evenly distributed-ish. And one of our teammates dropped out earlier on in the competition. Yeah, but it
Yeah, it was the same thing for me actually.
So there was
really.
somebody, this one, by the way, it's a very interesting question. So it used to be that we wouldn't kick out anyone from teams, even if they didn't do well. Then later we decided that it's not fair. So we started kicking out people. And the research
Mhm.
actually shows that if somebody is not performing, it's better to kick them out than the rest of the team does better than to keep them. But I don't know, I mean, I'm always a little sad when people leave in the middle of the project, not because, you know, they missed a good experience, but the rest of the team sort of, you know, it takes time to regroup and reassign the tasks and things. But yeah, it seems like you still successfully completed the project, right?
Yeah, we did.
So
We did.
how did you manage the leadership in teams? So was there a formal leader, or you all were
Yes.
about equal, or how did you do?
Yeah, we had a formally elected leader. I was the leader, but we also elected a guy, and so but we did this really late into the competition. So we did this like 2 weeks before the project submission, and that was like really bad because we hadn't done anything on the project until like the last 2 weeks.
I'll tell you this though, when we started the project, you know, years ago, it's been 10 years now, the first maybe 2 years, there was no weekly deliverables. So we formed the team and say, okay, see you in 2 months when you're done. And so then obviously everybody would just have fun, do nothing during the semester. They would play, but they would really not write anything. And then you ask them, so are you about done? Well, we have the idea. We have not realizing that there is a big, you know, long road from the idea to the actual, you know, paper. And so people that then frantically try to finish everything the last few days of the project, obviously not always work very well. So that's why we now have those weekly deliverables. But what happens in many cases, people submit something, so they produce something, but it's not much, and so they still end up doing most of the work at the end of the semester.
Yeah.
How about communication? How did you communicate in your team?
Okay, so the first week when we're getting to know each other and doing the surveys that we're asking about, like the countries they've been to, if they have pets, etc. So that time we had like solid conversation going on, and we had like conversation going on. But after that, about the project, what team we want to select, any ideas, etc. We had it during the first week and a half. But after that, conversation literally slowed down because some of our teammates had exams, project works, everything. So they were all piled up with stuff outside X culture. So they didn't dedicate as much time. So during the middle weeks of the project, there was no communication, just an occasional hi, have you done this, fill this, blah blah blah, but no actual conversation took place.
That's actually very, I'm glad that you share that. So it doesn't happen often, but it does happen sometimes that either some team members are not very active, or some, you know, the whole team is not very active for a while.
Right.
And so if I had to ask you this, then what would be your answer if you had to do it again? Do you think there is something you could have done to prevent that problem? Do you think it just happens because of bad luck, or do you think that something could have been done to you know, to make things better? And by the way, I don't know the answer. I'm honestly asking you for your advice, because I mean, I can think of some ideas that maybe would work, but we try all of them all the time, and still sometimes we have teams that are not, you know, for a while, you know, they would be waiting until the last few weeks. So if you were in charge of a team next time, so what would you do to make sure that it doesn't happen?
Right, so I would initiate conversations outside of X culture, so we become like friends, and it's no longer like a school thing we're doing. It becomes more of, I'm helping my friend out, or like we're doing this as friends. So I think that wasn't there. So if I didn't submit something I was due to submit, I didn't really feel that connection, like I was letting my friend down. It was like, oh, I just didn't do it, that was it. Like, but if I feel like if we had like connection outside of X culture, then maybe that would have been a bit harder to let pass by, I guess.
That is ally a very, very wise advice, and we are trying to do some research on it. So we have done a couple of studies. If you remember your first week, there was a test where we asked how well you know each other, like what we call a acquaintanceship test. And that's something new. We didn't do it before, but so we just finished a study where we compared how actively, you know, basically how responsible, essentially, how much effort people put in the project before we had the acquaintanceship test, then when we had it once, then we had one semester when we did it 2 weeks, and then we wanted to see if there is any difference. And yes, there is a big difference, evidently, because as you said, you know, once you know each other as a person, once you see each other as a friend, it's a whole different dynamic. But what we want to do next semester, so we have a professor who actually now is working on the design. So we want to add not only a test of how well you know each other, but maybe develop some sort of like team building activities or games, but more focused on helping you guys to get to know each other and become friends.
Each other, right.
So we will see how that goes, but we literally want to compare and do an experiment. So if we add those activities like friendship building games, let's call it this way, let's see if it's going to make any difference. I mean, the trade-off obviously is that the time you spend playing games and getting to know each other is not the time you spend writing the report. And since you only have 8 weeks to complete the report, I mean, if you spend half of that time, you know, getting to know each other, you don't have much time. So, but we will try, you know, maybe a week or two, or maybe, you know, a little bit every week, so where it's not interfering with your work. But I'm interested, you know, it's interesting that you said that, because that's exactly the types of conversations we're having now. Yeah.
That's lovely. And so I forgot to say thank you so much for the opportunity for opening it up to people outside. I mean, I really do appreciate it. I learned so much, and I mean, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your kind feedback. And we have another person, and again with a name that starts with a D. So Durva, is that how you pronounce your name?
Yeah, it's Durva.
What country are you in?
I'm from India.
From India, all right. And so what countries did you have represented on your team?
We had Puerto Rico, and we had Canada.
Canada?
And I think we had Pakistan also.
Very nice.
A lot of
so you
countries.
also had all the way from North America to Asia, so you had all of the time zones.
A lot of time difference, that is.
Very nice, very nice. And you won't believe another person who raised his hand is Dalen, and his name starts with a D. It's, you know, I don't know why today is such a D day, but yeah, good to know. So how about you, Dalen? Where are you, and what team, what countries did you have represented on your team?
I'm from Puerto Rico, and the countries that my teammates were Bulgaria, Serbia, I think Bangladesh, and Mauritius.
Very nice. Okay, yeah, so you all had pretty much 3-4 continents represented in each of your countries. So Dana and Deborah, so they had a formally elected leader. And again, I'm sorry I keep asking about leadership. It's another study we want to do. So as you know, at this time, we do not require the teams elect leaders. Some teams do, some teams don't. And it looks like when a team has a leader, it seems to help, but we haven't really tested it yet well enough. And so what I'm trying to get out of you to see if you had a team leader and if you think it helped, and if you think it did help, maybe that's something we should make mandatory moving forward. Or on the other hand, if you didn't have a team leader and it worked just fine, or you had a team leader, but the team leader was too bossy, too dictatorial, so maybe it's better to have, you know, kind of flat structure where everybody's equal. So how about you? So Dalen, Durva, did you guys have leaders in your team, or was it more everybody's equal?
We had a formally elected team leader, and it was actually really coordinated.
Okay. How about you, Dalen?
We had a team leader, but it was like a formal one and not like a real leader. We all were equal, but we had a leader to represent us.
So more like a coordinator, right? So
yeah.
Not a boss. Yeah, that's actually another good point. So in terms of the task distribution, and that's a question for all of you, I know that some teams would divide the workload by the question in the report. So they would say, for example, Dana, you work on marketing. Deborah, you work on HR. Durva, you will describe the country, the new market analysis. Dalen, you will work on logistics. And so that works sometimes well, but then what happens in many cases, the teams communicate a little bit less because everybody has their own task, and there is really not much need to talk to the rest of the team. Other teams sometimes divide the workload in a way where everybody is responsible for a different function. Like, for example, Dana, you will be the coordinator, so your job will be to remind us if we are behind the schedule or if somebody is not doing their job. Deborah, you will be the copy editor, so whatever we write, you will check grammar and spelling and all of that. Dalen, you will do the research, and so on and so on. What was your workload distribution? How did you decide who does what, and how did it work for you? Was it a good idea? Did it work? Did it not?
Well, at least in my team, we talked in WhatsApp, and we each one had a specific task. And when we completed it, all of us would check the other tasks and check for spelling, for corrections, if we could add if we could add something more, etc., etc.
Okay.
So we
That's a,
each had a specific task.
everybody read everybody's work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's more time consuming, but it's definitely, you know, if you want to have quality, that's how you go about it. How about the other teams? Is that what you did as well?
So what I did was to place the tasks on the task sheet on Google Drives, on Google Drive, and then what I would do was to kind of place the tasks based on my team members' willingness and participation. So I had, especially one of my teammates from Taiwan, she was a little bit more diligent and willing. So I gave her, I made sure that she wasn't too stressed, but I gave her a little bit more tasks. Some of my teammates who didn't do a lot of work, what I would do was to double the task. So I'd give them pretty much the same task, and whoever pulled through, I would use that part of it.
So you basically were monitoring at all times who's working on what?
Yes.
Try to redistribute the workload in a way that, you know, it's fair and, yeah, okay, that's
Yes.
that's actually very honorable and admirable of you to do that, because I know many people, you know, being a team leader always takes time. And
Yes.
sometimes the decisions you make, maybe somebody's not happy with them, so you sort of expose yourself to not really conflict, but, you know, it does take emotional energy, you know, to manage
Yeah.
it. And so I know it's always easier to kind of be somewhere in the back and just watch and do whatever you're told to do rather than to lead. So I'm very glad to see that you know, stepped forward and actually did that job. So it's a good experience. It will serve you well in the future.
And I would always follow up to see how they're doing, how they're managing, and so forth.
And I see Deborah is nodding. So it was that the same thing in your team?
Actually, no, but I think that was a really nice method
Strategy.
of taking care of it, right? So for me, I was elected way almost like till almost before the project submission. So we had to like really allocate tasks. So what we did was the two farthest in time zones. So we grouped them. So we grouped each of us into groups of two, and then I worked on by myself. So the first two would take care of section 1, the second two would take up section 2, and then I'd take care of section 3 or something of the sort. And then in the middle of the week, we'd swap sections, and then we'd go over, add stuff, all of that stuff, because we needed to get it done in 2 weeks, and we didn't really have time to take our time, you know, so that was what we did, you know.
So you had a very elaborate, we actually have 2 professors who are now doing research on leadership, time zones, and workload distribution. And so they specifically study what is the best way to form sub-teams based on the location of the person in terms of the time zone. And so they even have, they call them time brokers. So they even have this theory that people who are in the middle of the time zones, so basically those in Africa or Europe, if you also have Asia and the Americas, so they would be better coordinators because they can talk to everybody. Although again, Dana said that it was an advantage for her to be the last one, because by that time, you know, by the time everybody's done, she wakes up and can then assess the work.
And then,
Yeah, interesting.
So I was in the middle of the farthest time zone,
Right.
so I could
exactly.
exactly. Both sides, right?
Very interesting. Very interesting. And one thing I forgot to ask you: what clients did you choose for your teams? What were the client companies this time for you?
I was Team 26 UNCG.
Oh, thank you so much. So yeah, I'm your client essentially. So yeah, okay. How about you, Deborah?
We chose Oasis Rocket because one of our members was in Ukraine, so we thought it'd be easier to, you know.
Yeah,
their lives.
Yeah, and you know, I have a Ukrainian connection, so thank you for helping them too. How about you, Dalen? What was your client?
We also chose Oasis Rocket.
Oasis Rocket, yeah, they were quite popular. It's a small startup, but yeah, they're quite popular. Deborah, if you can still hear us, I saw you were outside. You're probably using data. So, what was your client?
We had WingU.
Which
as a
one?
client. WingU.
Oh yeah, Project 28, the French cosmetics company.
Yeah. I'm so sorry, I'm not able to, you know, do it on the video. There's a lot of disturbance out there.
Yeah, I saw that you're outside. Yes. Yeah. Okay, understandable. Okay, very nice, very nice. One question I also would like to ask you, and I'm curious. So we are preparing now for the next semester, and the reason I asked about the clients, we had a meeting with the professors trying to decide if we would like to have more companies or fewer companies. And so normally we would aim at about 10 or try to have about 10 companies. Sometimes we have 11, 12, but that would be the number that we sort of believe is a good one. But some professors believe it would be better to have fewer companies, but have more meetings with them. And so maybe we should have only 3 or 4, but have like, 3 or 4 webinars for each company. So I'm not sure if it's a good idea because that limits choice, but at the same time, yes, you will have a little bit more exposure and a little bit more correspondence with each company. What is your take on that? Do you think we should keep more companies or select fewer or maybe something else?
I'm neither for or against. If we have less companies, as you said, it would limit choice. And my team literally went through every company and weighed our pros and cons. If there are less companies as well, I think it would put a lot of pressure on the companies, especially
Yeah,
to
that's
answer questions and distribute information. So I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, yeah, and you're absolutely right about the pressure on the companies. So we now have the reports, and so we have some companies that had like 300 teams working on the challenge, and they said, "Oh yeah, just send me the reports, I'll read them." And I'm like, "Do you realize that 300 reports, each like,
Yeah, that's a lot.
like 10,000 pages?" And they're like, "Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay, I'll have to." So that's obviously somewhat problematic. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And another question that I was going to ask, some professors asked me to ask it. Did you talk about things that are not related to the project, not related to the task? Like, did you ever discuss things like, I don't know, movies or, I don't know, music or maybe hobbies or sports or whatever else that is not exactly the task that you had to complete?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
At first, especially at the first part of the project, we really tried to get to know each other. What we even did was host Zoom webinars
Mm-hmm.
on Saturday around this time. Actually, unfortunately, we had
Okay.
to miss some of these webinars
Mm-hmm.
with you, Dr. Charles, because it was more convenient.
If you have all continents represented, this seems to be the best time because Asia is already late, but they still can participate.
Yes.
And then America's you're already up. So if you're in California, you have to wake up maybe like at 6 a.m., but it's still doable. And
Yeah.
exactly.
So this time was quite perfect for our teammates to Zoom. And I got to know about them. One of my friends I call them my friends because
Right. Yeah.
I grew close to them, who lives in Taiwan, is interested in business, and she in fact works at a bank at only 17. And then one of my friends from the Philippines is interested in math and engineering. And I even found out that one of my teammates from India broke her leg. And at that time we had to be talking to her and hoping that everything was okay, but she healed quite quickly.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. And Dalen, you said you guys also talked a lot about things that are kind of more personal, fun.
Yeah, at least for the first 2-3 weeks, we actually did talk a lot about hobbies, about each other's cultures and music. And at least for the one in Bulgaria and Serbia, I learned about the goals, and they are very similar to mine. That is to make a lot of money left to be financially free.
Yeah, very good to hear that. One of the reasons, obviously, or one of the purposes of XCulture is, help people sort of make friends around the world. So, I mean, obviously, this online collaboration is important and business is important and, clients and consulting. But one of the things we kind of hope that it also leads to that you find friends in other countries, maybe even, I don't know, one day visit each other, maybe, stay in touch after the project. So it seems like you've developed some of those relationships. Deborah, was it also the case for you in your team?
No,
not
quite. Not quite. So during the surveys, which required us to say our hobbies and etc., so we do it in a format. So your name, these are my hobbies. So the first person to take the survey would list it.
So we're doing
that's how it works.
Yeah, we're doing this study where, one of the theories is that when people get to know each other better, then they do better. But what we found is that that's exactly what some teams do. So instead of trying to sort of get to know each other, they literally have a table and they say, okay, write your answers here. Okay, so, and then you literally just, and we don't know. So we know that that's sort of like a collusion type of deal. So which is, you know, maybe bad on the one hand, but you know, it's a highly effective way to solve the problem. And so would you then say that this, so that's something that messes up the data and makes it a little bit more difficult for us to test the hypothesis. So good to know, yeah. All right, okay. Well, so I don't want to keep you online much longer, so I'm not sure if there are more people who would like to share their experiences. Any other comments, observations, questions, concerns, recommendations maybe? Anything else? Dana, you're muted.
I found that Doodle was really helpful in
Yeah.
scheduling the time,
Yeah.
and I actually use it outside of Xculture now, so that was really
Yeah.
helpful.
And I'm glad to hear that one of the things people always tell me is that we need to build our own platform. So basically, you know, like an app on the phone or something where everybody would communicate. And not only will it be very difficult to do, I mean, we have limited resources, but one of the beauties or advantages of using all those free tools like Doodle, like Dropbox, like Google Docs, is that even after the project is over, you can keep using them. And so I'm very glad to hear that, you know, you didn't know Doodle, now you know it,
Yeah,
you know how to use it, and will use it in the future. Yeah, that's exactly the point. So that you learn a little bit, you know, about these tools and then know how to use them when you have to do it for your school, for your work, and so on. Yeah.
So I just wanted to share like an experience that I have with Xculture, and that is that only half of my teammates worked in the project. Yeah.
So when you say worked, you mean they didn't communicate at all, or they were sort of there, just didn't do much?
Okay, so we were 6, and one from Jamaica talked for like 3 days, and then just ditched us and didn't answer the WhatsApp group when we were asking things. So then we were just 5. And 2 more, one from Bangladesh, I think, and the one in Mauritius, they tried to work, but for some circumstances, they would not, wait, they didn't have the opportunity to work with us.
And you raise a very interesting question. So there are 2 things going on here. One, sometimes, in fact, often, people are just, well, I don't want to call them lazy, but sometimes you have people who just either don't care or, I don't know, just, I'm not disciplined enough to sustain the work level that we need. And that's why, by the way, we have all those pre-project, you know, theory tests and selections to make sure that those who are not serious, we not even allow them to participate. But then there is a second type where people really want to do the work, but in many cases it's hard for them. Like, for example, this semester we had one, as always, some people are in such countries or cities or towns where, you know, they may not have easy access to the internet. We literally had, I just posted on the Facebook, there was this one guy who said that he had to go to a different town to go to the library to be on the computer to communicate with his team. So for him, that was literally like he had to go somewhere else, like he didn't have his own computer. So that's, you know, a poorer country, you know, not as easy as it is. Like, for example, I always have my smartphone with me and I can go online anytime. For him, that was literally like just to send a few emails, he had to go, like, take a bus and go somewhere else. So that's, you know, that's one challenge. Another big challenge this semester specifically was that we had several countries that were going through political unrest and violence. So we had Venezuela, we had a part of India that was shut off, Kashmir, right? Then we had Syria, and we had, there was one more, Bolivia in Latin America. And so there was all kinds of stuff going on in those countries politically. And so some of them were literally, occasionally the internet was shut off, like literally shut off for the whole region of the country. Sometimes they had power outages. Then Venezuela obviously was especially bad. I mean, literally like no electricity for most of the time in most of the cities. And so we had emails from those team members who said, oh, I really want to participate, but I literally, like, I didn't have the power, the electricity for like 4 days. So I have it now, so I'm sending my email, but I'm not sure what's going to happen next. And so that made it obviously very difficult for them to be active I'm not even sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, obviously it's bad that both they couldn't participate and the team had to suffer because they were not able to participate. But sort of the positive of that is that, you know, it's international business. I mean, things like that happen. You know, today it's Venezuela or Syria, tomorrow it will be something else. And I guess, you know, you never can be fully prepared for something like this, but at least now some teams know that it happens. It happened before, it may happen again. So Dalen, in your case, do you think so they were just simply not responsible enough or just busy with other things? Or it was really difficult for them to be always online and they tried it, just a technological problem?
At least the one from Bangladesh, I know he had a motorcycle accident and he wasn't able to work with us. The other two, I think they were just lazy.
Yeah. And again, as much as I would like to say that, oh, you know, it happens all the time, or, you know, hopefully it will not happen again, the truth is that, you know, people, as I said, even professors, you know, we have highly responsible, highly trained professors, and even they sometimes are late with, for example, those report evaluations. So I guess what you've experienced, I mean, I'm not happy to hear that it was 3 people. I mean, if it was just 1, I guess I would say, yeah, it happened. So 3, that's way too many. But the truth is, I guess, when you will be working in someone who is, you know, lazy, there will be always someone who happens to be in a country where, you know, getting online is like a heaven task. There will be always someone who will get in an accident, someone maybe who will be bossy or irresponsible or disrespectful or bully or, you know, whatever else. So unfortunately it happens, but one of the benefits of culture is to sort of give you an opportunity to experience it now, so that when it happens in the future, you sort of know what to expect and how to. So, my apology that you had to go through this, but at the same time, I hope you recognize it made you a little bit wiser, and so you will know how these things can work when you have to do it the next time.
Yeah, and I like to add that the people that did work with me, my other 2 teammates, I grew very attached to them because they worked very hard, and I think we managed to do a great project with only the 3 of us.
Yeah, I don't know, let me see, I'm not supposed to reveal the results until we announce the winners, but well, actually, yeah, so I wanted to give you your grades. You'll get your reviews soon, and we will announce the winners probably within a week or so. But honestly, I was quite impressed by the quality of work. So you guys are a little bit younger, obviously. So as you know, we had about 6,200 participants this semester, but almost all of them were university students. In fact, most of them were, a good half of them were MBA students. So they were like 28, 29, 30. We even had some people in their 40s and 50s. And so obviously, you know, they have much more experience. They're much better prepared. So they've taken a lot of business courses and many have work experience. But as I was reading the reports, I was actually quite impressed by the quality of work done by the pre-college teams, you know, kids of your age. And I don't know, I mean, either you are so smart or maybe you know, sought help of your teachers or parents, whatever that is, but somehow in the end, you actually produced pretty good reports. And again, some of them are really, really good. Some are just, you know, just simply acceptable. But it's actually quite amazing that at your age, you can produce work of that quality. Like I know when I was 14, 15, like I know I wouldn't be able to do it that way. So quite impressive, quite impressive. Keep copies of those reports. I mean, soon enough, you will be applying to universities for jobs. And so your recruiters will probably want to see samples of your work. So many of those reports, I would be very proud to show and say, well, this is what I did with a team from, you know, with people from all around the world. So that's quite an accomplishment. And as I said, some of them look very, very professional. And so when we will be selecting the winners, we will keep the pre-college teams separate from the university students. But to be honest, sometimes we don't even have to do that. I mean, sometimes the quality of work is comparable. And sometimes I even, you know, it seems to me that at least this semester, I think some of the reports produced by the teams probably could be winners in the overall competition. We don't even have to separate them in this younger league. So we'll have to see what the final results look like. But again, I don't know. I know Dana said you're team 26, so that's the only team
Yes.
at this time. So, but yeah, I was quite impressed by the quality. Yeah. You made your school proud, you made your parents proud, you made your countries proud.
And ourselves
Very good
proud.
job. Very good. All right, so we're pretty much out of time. I have a meeting with the professors in a few minutes. We want to discuss with them how things went for them and what we can do to make it better next semester. So we'll be starting in a few minutes. But thank you so much for your participation, for your kind feedback. I will read your reflection papers, probably have read some of them. We'll read the remainder. So lots of good ideas there. And I truly hope that at least some of you will visit the X-Culture Symposium in Singapore. And then the next one will be in Miami a little bit later. And maybe even some of you will decide to become the coaches for the next generation of X-Culture kids. So this way you will share your experience and gain new experience, not now as a member of a team, but more as a mentor, as a manager, as a older brother, older sister. So if we will be sending out the invitation soon.
Can I say something?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think it would be nice if you assigned a coach to each of the younger teams, because for my team, we kind of took a while to get in the groove of doing a project, getting to know each other, assigning arranging calls, etc. So I think if we had a coach assigned, I mean, we were assigned a coach the last 2 weeks, Coach Claudia, and I mean, she helped us.
Because you raised a very, very good question. So one of the issues that we sort of struggle with is, do we want to assign a coach to each team by default, or should we wait until the team asks for a coach to be assigned to them? And so now we have the system where we wait. So unless you tell us we want a coach, we don't do anything. But the problem is that some teams may be shy, may be uncomfortable asking for help, or may think that they will work it out. So I don't know. So you think it would be better if automatically a coach is assigned to each kid's team from the beginning to kind of keep an eye and see on what's going on in those teams?
Yes, I think that would have been very helpful. It would have saved us a lot of time and a lot of dilly-dallying and getting to know how to work certain apps and everything. Maybe after you
again, we don't want to impose a coach on a team, but I think if in the early weeks the person just kind of inquires, is everything okay? Are you guys doing fine? I looked at your peer evaluations. Yes. So this way, just kind of keeping in what they say, hand on the pulse, just, making sure that everything's
yes.
Maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll do that next semester.
Yes.
Maybe you should even apply to be one of those coaches. And so this
I do want to.
Wonderful.
I do want to.
Dana, you have a
I have something I wanted to add. I think adding a coach to each team, or even for them just to check up, would be helpful. Yeah. Before X-Culture, I usually used Explorer as my browser. And I found that when I tried to log into Zoom, I couldn't connect to the mic or even the camera. So my suggestion would be at least to tell us participants to use Google Chrome instead of Explorer in order for us to connect.
So I finally found you. So they said there are still people who still use Explorer. I'm like, no. And they say, no, there are, time to switch. Yes, time to switch. Well, one thing, Dana, also, yes, actually, that's a good point. Maybe we should talk about that. Another thing that we should also discuss in training, we didn't do it this semester, but it turned out to be a problem. So none of you had team members from China, right? So there was Taiwan, but China this semester. So they always block some of the communication tools. Like, for example, Google tools don't work in China. WhatsApp is blocked in China. But this semester, because of all this trade war going on between China and the United States, not only they would not allow Western tools to work in China, but it looks also that they limited the use of the Chinese communication tools outside China. Like, for example, they have this WeChat and we have QQ. And for some reason, that would not install, at least in the United States. We had students in my own class where they, say, well, let's try to install it again. And so the app just wouldn't work. And so that was a big problem, because all of a sudden there was no easy way to communicate with China, because they cannot use WhatsApp, Viber, Google Docs, whatever, and we cannot use QQ or WeChat. And so that was something we didn't expect, but that was a problem. And I think that's something we need to inform the teams in advance so that they, don't have that as a surprise. So good to know. Firefox also seems to be pretty good as far as handling all of those, Zoom and whatever other tools. So that should be fine too. Okay, all right. So then any of you planning to go to Singapore if everything goes fine?
Yes.
Yeah. We'll be sending out the invitations soon. So still working out some little remaining details, but hopefully at least some of you will be able to join us there. And so obviously once you spend a whole week together, that's a whole different experience. So virtual collaboration is good, but face-to-face, it's much more in-depth. You know, when we go home, people always cry, and then by the way, some develop good relationships, like we had. Again, you're still too young, so we shouldn't be worrying about that. But the students, you know, sometimes fall in love and start dating. I don't think anybody married yet, but we have to come and go and visit each other. So, you know, that's kind of what we want. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. So I really need to go to
Thank
the
you,
meeting.
Sarah.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody else who were
Thank you,
watching us. I see
Dr. Cyrus.
quite a few people watching
Thank
live.
you.
So I wish you all joined and talked to us, but hopefully you still learned something from our speakers here today. And yeah, stay in touch. So I will be sending you the documents within the next several days, and then truly hope to see some of you next semester in the coaching program, and then in Singapore. And if summer doesn't work for you, as I said, we will have then in the fall another meeting in the United States, and then so we alternate summers overseas, falls in the United States. So hopefully one of those meetings you will join us. All right, thank you so much, and stay in touch.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.